Before we get started here, just to mention that we had a couple of people actually reach out to us and introduce us to a group, the Deaf Community Services in San Diego. And because we had some members who, or guests in fact, who wanted to join today's meeting who are artists and are deaf. And so they put us in contact. In fact, I see Hannah, you're on there. Hannah, yeah, I can spotlight Hannah's video here, because just a little couple of ground rules on
Very
Zoom.
nice. My husband can see her face quite well.
Yes, that's right.
So my team is actually Neil as well, so we'll both be working on this together once Sean logs in, and then we'll go from there. Or, you know. Hi, Neil.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, thank you so much. So just to explain, I've not done this before on Zoom, but on Zoom, you know, normally by default, everybody has like a grid of little pictures, little videos in front of you. And if you move your mouse over the little video, if you're on an iPad or a tablet or something, if you tap on the video of the person, there's three little dots in the top corner or an ellipsis. So when you tap on those, you can pin the video. Okay. So when you hit pin video, that person kind of goes to takes up most of the screen, and you see half a dozen little other faces at the top of them. So what we're going to try and do here, obviously, Neil, who's going to be doing the interpreting, is I can spotlight his video, and or when Sean Michael gets on, he hopefully can pin Neil's video. But when people are talking, you know, you want to look at the featured speaker who's talking, you can just move over their video and pin their video. Because yeah, Zoom operates in two kind of modes. One is this grid view, where you see, you know, dozens of faces, and in the top right-hand corner of your screen, you can toggle between the grid view and what they call the speaker view. So when you move to the speaker view, you'll see just the featured speaker and a few smaller heads at the top. And if you get confused and that doesn't make any sense, you can chat me from the chat, which is at the bottom. You can hit chat. And there's myself, and there's a bunch of co-hosts on today. There's Maren, obviously, myself, Kit and Angela. And so you can message any of us or message everyone. You can just hit the everyone button on chat, and people will jump in and message you back to give you any help that you need. Okay.
So John, you said if you click on them and you click on the three dots, you can pin them?
Yeah, yeah. Does it come up with a little?
When I try that, all I get is an opportunity to chat them. I click on the three dots and it just says chat. There's no opportunity to pin.
Oh, okay. Well, anybody else, when you click on the three little dots, can you pin the video?
I don't see the three little dots.
Yeah, just in the corner of somebody's image. If you hover in the mouse to the top right-hand corner of their image.
Or someone's image.
Yeah.
Oh, like Hannah's had three little dots. There they are.
Yeah, I can only get chat as well.
Okay. So it may depend on the great thing with Zoom is there's so many different flavors of it and which version you've updated to and which device you're on. But what we'll try and do is keep the spotlight on Neil so that Sean Michael will be able to see okay. And if I'm looking at the moment, I don't see Sean has joined. But we'll try and reach out to him and make sure he can get on. But with that, as it's just turned 4 o'clock, I'll hand over to Maren. And I'll do that by spotlighting her video. So hopefully you can see Maren.
Is my face just giant on everybody's screen?
Yes.
Well, yeah, and Ulrich likes it better when your face is big because he's so blind. So there, take a good look at Maren.
My face is a little sandy. I just got out of the water a little bit ago. I don't know how big the face is going to be. But thank you so much, Hannah and Neil, for allowing us to do that. And it brings up that we really should be doing that at all of our meetings, actually. So thank you so much. And we will going forward on Zoom or not. I think that I'm sure, John, probably we can figure out a way to do that on the screen when we're back at the assembly hall, right?
Yeah, I think it's great. It's a wonderful service. And yeah, it's excellent.
Thank you for reaching out to us. We're happy to work with you guys.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Yes, and I think it will be great. All the DEM clubs should be doing this as well. So it kind of brings up that we need to make everything more accessible. So thank you all for joining us. and we have a really amazing program today. So in terms of our agenda, since it's a Zoom meeting, it's not really technically a real meeting, right? So I think that with that, we are going to give reports from the officers just because we do have some relevant things that everybody should know about from the club. And hopefully we'll be shifting to an in-person meeting kind of going forward. We typically do not have a June meeting just because that is the OB Street Fair. So we wouldn't be having a meeting for June anyway. But going forward, we'll be getting emails, checking the Facebook page, all of that, kind of keeping everybody posted on meeting stuff. So Kip and I, Kip, are you there? Can you unmute yourself and we can kind of talk about how this is going to work going forward? Kip and I had talked about a program on the arts in San Diego for quite a while, just because this is sort of a topic that I think that there's a lot of interest, but maybe not something that everybody knows about in terms of how the city or the county or people interested in politics generally are able to support the arts. And one of the best things that I've seen on the internet in recent months is this idea of, if you think that the arts shouldn't be funded or that the arts maybe aren't a priority, try getting through your quarantine without music, without television, without books, without any art. It would be completely impossible, right? The arts are absolutely necessary. So I think we're gonna let candidates' statements go first before we jump into that. So in terms of candidates, I'm not sure if we have anybody waiting on the line. I know Doug, I saw you. Do you want to go first and do your candidate or representatives of candidate? And then anybody else that's a candidate or a rep of a candidate, please chat to me so we'll know that you can go next too.
Great, thank you. My name is Doug Kayson. I am the Political Affairs Director for Senate President Pro Tem Tony Atkins. The State Senate reconvened on May the 11th after their unscheduled recess, and their top order of business is the adoption of a state budget, which by the state constitution must be adopted by June the 15th. Most likely they're going to adopt a baseline budget because a lot of the state projections in terms of revenue and expenses won't be known until later this summer, especially since income taxes were deferred. So it's quite likely that in addition to the budget that they adopt on June 15th or before, there'll be a revised budget that happens later this summer or perhaps even early fall. You probably saw that the governor announced his May revise, and his proposed budget indicated there was a $54 billion deficit. That is the deficit from what projection was in January to what it would be at the end of the next fiscal year. The Federal CARES Act will help to cover some of the COVID-related expenses. And fortunately, the state, because of its prudent policies over the past few years, has established rainy day funds and other reserves. We have $17 billion in those, and it's definitely raining outside, and so we can use some of the rainy day funds. The Senate Democrats' proposal differs a little bit from what the governor has proposed. The Senate Democrats would assume that we will get $14 billion in additional funds from the federal government, and then we'll trigger some solutions effective October 1st if those funds don't come through. And that approach differs from the governor's approach and avoids the harm to schools and other safety net programs by not implementing harsh cuts that may turn out not to be necessary. On behalf of Senate Democrats, the Pro Tem unveiled a tenant-landlord stabilization program. This is a voluntary program where renters and the state and the landlords would enter into an agreement. The tenants would be forgiven their rent and protected from eviction, and then the landlords would receive transferable tax credits equal to or nearly equal to the value of the missed rent payments. And then renters can reimburse the state for the cost of those tax credits over a 10-year period beginning in 2024. This past week, in an effort to spur affordable housing production and aid California's economic recovery due to the COVID crisis, the Senate Democrats unveiled a package of legislation intended to bolster production of new housing and remove existing barriers by further streamlining the development process. The Senator staff continues to work remotely, and they are working on a record number of constituent calls, particularly around the issues of unemployment and healthcare issues. If you or somebody you know needs assistance with a state agency or a state program, please feel free to contact our office. And I will include in the chat the contact information as well as some links to the legislation and budget issues I've been talking about and some COVID-19 resources. So thank you.
Thanks, Doug. Do we have the website, contact, emails, and all that kind of stuff in the chat for you too?
Yes, and I'll put that there.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, Tim Nader, you're up next.
Thank you, Maren. Hi, everybody. I'm Tim Nader. I think most of you know me by now. I am running for judge in a runoff this November, Superior Court seat number 30. I'm not going to give my regular pitch today in light of what's been going on. I think it's moved all of us very deeply. I think that what has been happening in the last few days underscores how critical it is that we restore faith that there is equal protection of the law in this country. And unfortunately, I think that faith has been undermined by what has been coming out of Washington in the last several years. There's a long history, of course, of racial injustice in this country. But we need leaders who advocate for changing that history, for moving forward. And we need people at every level of authority, especially in the justice system, who are advocates for progress and not for the status quo, which is absolutely unacceptable. I think those who know me and who know my record as a councilman, as a mayor, and as a community college trustee know that I do not settle for the status quo when it is wrong. I am committed to the equal protection of the law that is supposed to have been guaranteed by the 14th Amendment of the US Constitution since the Civil War. And I have the experience in the background to, I hope, be somebody who moves forward rather than backward, the confidence of all of the community in our system. So I would appreciate your support. It is a countywide race. Everyone in the county votes on it. Please let your friends know. Let me know who I can talk to get the word out, because this is going to be a very expensive race. I'll put my contact information up in the chat window if you want to contact us, donate, volunteer, or whatever you can do, or help me network with other groups. Thank you for what you're doing here. Thanks for supporting the values that make this country great. And I'm looking forward to your program. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. And if you want to chat anything into the chat box in terms of website, contact information for your campaign or anything like that, go ahead and do that, please. Rob Howard, you're up next.
Just to jump in. Yeah, Michelle Krug has a hand raised, Maren.
Oh, yes. Oh, I saw that. You know what, Michelle, I'm going to go ahead and let you go next if you can hear me. Just because I didn't see, I didn't want to chat to you. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, Michelle, and you can go now, okay?
Could we highlight Hannah really quick?
So am I on, can you hear me?
Yeah, Michelle, hold just 1 second, Michelle. Sorry, Neil, go ahead.
We're going to switch to Hannah.
Okay.
Excellent. Yeah, I'll spotlight Hannah instead then. That's great. And then, yeah, Michelle, if you can go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I can never tell if I'm on mute or unmute. And Maren, just for future reference, I'm happy to have like heavy, serious, candidates go. We always go first. I am a candidate, actually, kind of. It's the Democratic National Convention. And those of you who live in the 53rd Congressional District, which I know of a number do, and a number live in the 52nd. But if you are in the 53rd and you requested a Bernie ballot, I will be on your ballot. So they finished making requests for ballots, but you will get your ballot on June 5th. So please just pay attention to that. And you only have until June 7th to actually return it to pick the delegates to go to the Democratic Convention, I'm all hoping that it's going to be virtual. That's all. I just wanted to make that announcement, and I always make the announcement about the census. So if you can help lift that up, I'm sure everybody on this call has filled out theirs, but we really need everybody to keep mentioning it to everybody else to make sure we get it in. Thanks.
Thanks, Michelle. All right, Rob, you're up.
Thank you. I appreciate it. My name's Rob Howard. I'm a candidate for Oceanside Mayor. Wanted to also just give the club a little bit of my background and share some of the things I'm concerned about and why I'm running. I am a nuclear plant operator for San Onofre. I've been in the nuclear industry over 35 years. I am president of my local union and an executive board member for the Labor Council. As you can all tell, and many people will talk about, we have reasons to focus locally. Some of the issues and policies that need to be addressed are really dictated by our local elected officials. And I believe if we work together, we can actually make some of these changes and not be afraid to make those changes. In North County, we're really working to get Democrats elected, but that's going to take us working to engage those Democrats in the county that don't feel engaged with the party. So we have young people and those not so young excited about the opportunity to make a difference. I'm going to put my information in the chat so that you can actually contact me if you want to talk about these things, or you know how we can work together to improve our community, because we're trying to build Oceanside's future today. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rob. And yes, in the chat, and then I can get them on our outgoing mailer as well.
Thank you.
Okay, whoever I said was going to be after Rob, I think Nora.
Yes, how are you, my dear? Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Nora Vargas, candidate for the San Diego County Board of Supervisors, District 1. We've had the pleasure of working together and coming to visit you many times prior to even being a candidate in my role as an executive for Planned Parenthood. And, you know, today I just really want to check in with everyone. And I know you're probably all feeling sort of the same way that I am, which is with a heavy heart based on what we're seeing happen in our country. All of this is being fueled by a very, very toxic president who honestly doesn't understand firsthand or doesn't care firsthand about what's happening in our local communities on the ground. And I've been very fortunate, I think, to serve as the president of the governing board now at Southwestern College, and the work that we're doing for our students and being at the forefront, particularly during this pandemic. We've been able to ensure that we get hazard pay for our employees. We have been able to ensure that our students are having access to food, and also, you know, access to technology, and really thinking outside the box of how we get things to our community so that people can continue to have, healthy lives while they're trying to figure out how to navigate this COVID situation and the pandemic. I started a platform called Conexiones because there's a lot of need for information in English and Spanish for our communities. I think many of you know that access to technology and access to in-language services is key to make sure that people are healthy. And why does it matter? Aside from the fact that it's the humane thing to do, the reality is that many of the folks who live in our district, in District 1, are folks who are in the front lines and who are our essential employees. And so we want to make sure that they're healthy. I'm running for the Board of Supervisors because the county plays a pivotal role in the future of this community. And so I want to use my fiscal experience. I want to make sure that I use my financial acumen, my experience in building partnerships and bringing communities together to move our district forward. I will tell you that I'm really proud that I recently received the endorsement of Controller Betty Yee and Treasurer Fiona Ma because of my work that I did with them on the pension board at CalSTRS and our longtime work as advocates for healthcare and economic recovery. I hope that you will consider supporting me as we're moving forward, because it's not just about having a Democrat in the seat, it's having the Democrat who's going to be your champion for our communities around climate change and all the issues that all of us care about. So thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to the presentation. I keep going back and forth because there was also, I think I mentioned before, I had also joined the gathering that's taking place regarding some of the recent issues that have happened. So I'll be back and I'll stay here because I really want to hear some of this that's happening. And thank you for the sign language. I think it's super cool.
Thanks, Nora. Joe LaCava?
Thank you, Mariana. Joel Calvin, running for San Diego City Council, District 1. We finished first in the primary, but I guess my heart is a little bit too heavy to talk about the campaign with all the things that are going on. You know, we were faced with some tough situations with the COVID-19 and the lack of attention and measuring so that we could wrap our heads around it and do the kind of social distancing and that should have been done from the get-go. And a lot of people are obviously hurting either because they are sick or because they've lost a loved one or that they have lost work given the high unemployment in our city. And now on top of this, we have one more time another incident of police brutality, misconduct, whatever you want to call it, taking away the life of a African American. I was disappointed that the city didn't call for the Police Community Relations Board meeting that should have been held this month, where we can begin to talk about these issues and help work with the San Diego Police Department. I've been watching the what is happening downtown this afternoon, and it is certainly concerning here. But I still have that hope and that confidence that if people like me with that have been had the privileged life can stop and listen to people who have the lived experience and learn from them and understand what they need and how we can be of assistance to them to be allies in these very difficult conversations that are difficult across the board. But I have that hope. I'm encouraged by the kind of candidates that we have coming forward and running for office. And I think I see a new era both in the city and across our region and hopefully across our country that will take us to a better place. So I'll stop it there, have faith, have confidence, have hope. We will get to a better place if we just stop and listen to those people that are suffering and work together to help them move forward. Thank you, and thank you to the club, and thank you to Marin for your leadership.
Thanks, Joe. So thank you, candidates. Any candidates that would like to chat anything to everybody, you're welcome to in terms of resources or how to contact you, your website, if you'd like to volunteer. And thank you, John Laughlin, for the catch that, yes, I do actually need to call the meeting to order. So Kip, if you're, it's being recorded, but also we are officially called to order at 4:20, which I neglected to do earlier. We can conduct business over Zoom. We had kind of a gray area last time. So we're excited to bring you this meeting about the arts. I know that there are many other things going on now other than this, obviously. And I think we can have some time for discussion as well a bit later. So Kip and I had discussed in terms of program and who's going to be the MC, and I know that he has a special interest in this topic today. So I'm going to turn it over to him for him to be able to introduce our first speaker.
Hi everyone, I'm Kip Aishan. Thank you, Marin. I'm the secretary of the club. It's nice to see you all. Today we have a great lineup of arts professionals working in various different practices. They're engaging with political themes, giving voice to diverse politics, and even running for office. And later on, I think Todd Gloria will be hopping on the call. Each of our speakers will present individually and then open up for some questions before we move to the next. So please put in chat any questions you might have. First off is Zoya Sardashti. Zoya is a performance researcher who recently moved to San Diego from Milan. She's going to speak about participatory politics, civic engagement, and her experience exhibiting here in San Diego. And again, please don't hesitate with questions into the chat. Zoya, thank you very much.
Thank you, Kip. Hello, everyone. It's good to join you. I'd like to start off and ask everybody about a performance that you witnessed that seemed to change your perception or help you communicate better, or perhaps made you feel a little lighter. And I want to know if that performance took place in a theater, or if it took place in a cafe, or maybe in a park. And then I want you to think about how much you spent on that performance, and not just time, but also money. So I want you to think about also how maybe performance can help us be better thinkers and communicators, and how performance can help us desegregate this line between arts and civic engagement. It's true that we definitely need renewal, and that the arts isn't really a place that can be to the right or to the left. It really is the center point of how people come together and find common ground, but also have a sense of unity. And so what I do is I offer performance and the modes of performance as a way to connect to people and to form assembly and to create alliances across cultural barriers. And I started working as a performance researcher in Italy, where I was given a stipend, I was given housing, I was given access to a community to create performances within a certain framework. And this framework is about cultural exchange in performance. I think there might be documentation to show you, but if not, I'll just keep going. So what I try to do is give people an opportunity to reflect together, to speak together, to also even collaborate on the documentation of a performance. So maybe the performance, what happens between us, exists in our memory, but somehow that experience is in written form, whether you write on the costume that you wore during a walk that we took around the city. Or maybe you wrote your family name, including both your mother and father's last name, on a mirror and took a selfie and only sent it to your mother. These sort of modes of interacting shouldn't cost anything, because the value stays with the community, it stays with the collaborators involved. And in Italy, the funding always came from the state. So the taxpayers already paid for art programming, and so it's not free. I mean, it is free to all. And maybe I'll just stop here and allow, I can't see our translators, but maybe we can just, okay, thank you. So this is a performance that I did in multiple places in Florence, Milan, and Bolzano, called To Be Seen and Unseen. And I wanted to see what it was like to give people a mask and costumes and walk around the city talking about what it's like to have a conversation when you're completely covered, and how you can communicate in a more intimate way when you are maybe performing a different version of yourself. And of course, we were talking about what it means to be free or liberated. And here's a picture of like the gallery, one of the galleries where the costumes were exhibited. But I guess as a—
Excuse me, it looks like we need to pin the interpreter. I apologize for the interruption.
Okay.
We need to pin the interpreter. I apologize.
It's okay.
He's asking where the interpreter is. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Just to check, Neil. Yeah, so we're sharing slides on the screen for Sean Michael to see, and then we spotlighted at Hannah.
Perfect. Okay. It looks like she's there now. Great. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks. John, maybe we can go back a few slides. If you don't
himself on
mind.
his device.
Okay. So participation is a collaboration between the audience who somehow becomes involved and they are performing as well. And it's not about you have to perform as if you were a trained actor. It's just you are given an opportunity to communicate and participate in dialogue. So we were talking about what the arts can do in terms of how it translates to participatory politics. So maybe we think of like Washington as a place very far away, very distant, hard to access. I translate this in a performance workshop setting to invite people to come and work on the 3 core elements: theory, art, and social action. So how can we map out our experience of what we perceive to be same and different through moving on a grid, moving through a grid? How can we look at other people's experience, maybe moving through a grid and looking at like, how do I choreograph sameness? How do I choreograph different? And how do we do it as individuals? And how do we do it collectively? So what is our understanding of solidarity? It's very abstract, but that's okay because we ground it. We use performance practice techniques to research and ground it into something that is tangible, that we can see, right? Whether that's the documentation through video or sketches. And also this performative workshop includes a convivial party with directives. So this is documentation of work that was exhibited from the workshop. And this is when I was working in Milan. And we invited people into this performance space and we filled these bottles up with watered down vodka, but also filled it with like honey and cardamom pods and saffron and dried rose buds. And we gave people just like little sips and little tastes of this liquid and asked them to name the contents inside. And when they would come back for maybe another sip, they noticed that, and you'll see this on the table, on the Post-its, articles of the Constitution. And then you also see the social theory that we were working with, Judith Butler's text, Notes Toward a Performative Theory of Assembly. And so we had the text, we had the articles of the Constitution, and we'd ask people to say, well, look at this, and why don't you choose your favorite article of the Constitution? What is your favorite human right? And with the saffron and the music in the background, we had a DJ, and with my colleagues who were there to sort of facilitate this process of opening up and discussing politics and human rights issues in an inclusive place where you would not feel judged, but as art is, a place for people to come together and discuss and reflect and refine the technique of communicating across differences. We were able to pass the microphone around and have people, say, I think that we should support more projects and research in the arts and sciences. I believe that there should be a separation of church and state. And in an Italian context, you can imagine how transformative that experience was. So I won't read what you can see on the screen, but I really believe that once we collapse the distance between civic engagement and artistic engagement is when we can truly really understand and tease out the details of like what are the differences in communication and how we can refine the way we communicate and feel good as a healthy, fully functioning body politic. And this is my collective home soil. And you can take down my information if you want, if you'd like to participate in an upcoming workshop or performance.
Thank you, Zoya, so much for talking to us about how the government in Italy really helped to bring together different publics and this ability to talk about the separation of church and state, things in the Constitution that we take for granted, but that might need to be more expressed through this participatory performance pieces. Thank you very much, Zoya, and we'll look in the chat for any questions for her. Next up, we have Jacqueline Marino. Jacqueline is the Exhibitions and Programs Manager at the San Diego Art Institute in Balboa Park. This is a really amazing organization showing work that would otherwise be underrepresented in San Diego. The Art Institute is so lucky to have Jacqueline, and we're very lucky to have her with us today. She's going to be talking about the importance of city funding as well, past and upcoming projects, as well as how her organization is coping with this new environment. I do just want to add that Jacqueline's presentation today reflects her own experience and political beliefs and isn't an official position of the San Diego Art Institute. Jacqueline, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you, Kip. And
Jacqueline, sorry, just to jump in, just to check, Michelle Krug is on the phone, so she can't see what's going on. She has a hand raised. If Michelle, I'll unmute you if you wanna speak now.
Hello. Talking about
Okay, so she may have had a hand raised in error, so sorry to interrupt, Jacqueline, but just in case, and we'll let you carry on. Sorry about that.
Jacqueline,
No problem.
thank you.
Okay, so anyway, thank you so much to the Point Loma Democrats for having me here today to talk shop on art and cultural funding and how we can, show up for the artists in our community and our arts organizations. So like Kip said, I'm the Exhibitions and Programs Manager at SDAI in Balboa Park. And if you're not familiar with us, we're your local contemporary art center that focuses on the thriving artists and voices of our region, which includes Southern California and Northern Baja. And what I do there is essentially produce and manage all the moving parts of our exhibitions. So I work closely with local artists and curators, really just to facilitate making their vision and voice a reality. And yeah, so I'm going to just talk a little bit about what we're working on during this time, and some other opportunities that are coming up for the arts to be supported. I also just want to take a very quick moment just to express my own solidarity and support of everyone who is out there protesting this weekend in San Diego and across the US against the police brutality and racism that exists in this country. I think it's just important that we note that we're really looking to our elected officials now, our mayors, governors, to respond to the situation and think about how they're working with budgets and how those can maybe be redistributed. So anyway, on that note, I'm here to talk about the importance of and the impact that can be made possible through increased and intentional funding to support the arts and cultural economy, and by proxy, amplify the voices of those that truly make up these communities. So in San Diego's known for so much, but the arts always seem to kind of fall behind. However, when you look at it, we have some of the best arts university, community college programs in the US with incredibly, internationally renowned artists as faculty. We have an amazing location as a border city, and with that, access to an incredibly creative, boundary-breaking network of artists that are existing in Tijuana and the rest of Baja with such a unique point of view. And another thing that I find really great with San Diego is that there's this really strong ethos of collaboration that I don't think is as prevalent in many cities. And here, you see inspiration from artists taken from the physical landscape, the political landscape, US-Mexico border, and there's also really innovative collaborations across disciplines like tech and global health, which San Diego has such a strong foothold in. So I'm really interested to see how that can, kind of increase over time. And I can kind of go on to espouse how strong and vital these artists are to the cultural fabric of this town. But I think it's important to recognize that we often lose a lot of that talent to larger cities that might have more opportunities for artists to build their career. So having institutions and art spaces that can thrive and get the financial support they need makes staying here an actual viable option. So at San
kind of weird in that I never really was interested in art growing up. I actually kind of disrespected it. And I thought it wasn't going to pay the bills. I came from very humble beginnings. Well, I was born into, I guess, back up. I was born, we had a lot of wealth. Then something really bad happened, and we were all of a sudden on welfare. And so what had happened was it created this kid that never wanted to suffer. And so all I cared about was sort of power and money because I wanted to make sure that my family was set. I didn't want to ever experience seeing my mom go to churches and ask for food and seeing her cry because we didn't have money, or going to sleep hungry because we didn't have enough food. And so it created this kind of a beast. And so I went and I was president of my fraternity. I joined the Freemasons. I've done some really, incredible stuff just to try to make sure that professionally I was set up. And it wasn't until I got to the LSC, the London School of Economics, that my whole world was rocked. And it was rocked because of three reasons. And I give a talk on it at Creative Mornings, and I'll put the link there. It's a lengthy talk, but the general gist is my older brother, who painted this painting behind me, he was the artist. He was the philosopher. He's got a PhD in performance studies. He's been the artist since we were little kids. And we were young, we would battle a lot because he just wanted to read books and philosophize and pursue his art. And I didn't. I wanted to go get a job. We got to take care of mom. Like, what are you talking about, this art stuff? And I was out in LA helping him with a show he was doing. And he looked at my notebook, which I think you guys can see even in that picture. I doodle a lot. Everywhere I go, since I was a little kid, I doodle. So he saw that and he said, man, put that on canvas. You're an artist. And then that started a journey that would change my life forever. Then I had a roommate. I grew up in Texas, very conservative. You could probably say that I wasn't, especially when it came to LGBTQ or loving anybody you believed in. It wasn't something I was exposed to, and so you could say I had insecurities about other people and who they chose to love. Well, I go to London, I find an apartment in Soho, and my roommate is the creative director for Elle magazine, and he's gay. And I've never had someone that was gay be so close in my life. And it turns out years later, we became best friends. I mean, we would go out on dates together. He didn't cook, I would cook, he would bring wine, and he really broke down what I thought life should be, and who you should love and how you should think the world through. And then the final straw that sort of broke my back and really brought me into the world of art and empathy is a professor I had at the LSE. Most of the classes at the LSE are pretty much like economic or government heavy, but he was the philosophy teacher. And we had a class where he talked about the levels of measurement. And I think this is really what my art and my practice is about, because I think that our levels of measurements in society is off. And I want my art to really inspire people to try to adjust that. And so what I mean by that is he talked about when you look and you picture a tree and you see a tree outside, there are two levels of measurements generally. There's the art, there's the political, or in other words, there's the aesthetic or the economic. And the aesthetic level of measurement is going to look at that tree and say, man, look how amazing that tree looks. It stands so strong. Look at the way it provides fruit for people to eat, shade for people to get out from the sun. It's amazing. That's one level of measurement, the aesthetic. The economic or the political level of measurement is going to look at that and say, you know what? I can turn that tree into 777 pencils. I can take it and turn it into 10,476 sheets of paper, and I can build a yacht with it, right? And what I would argue and what I would propose is that the struggles that we see in society today are because our levels of measurement are off. We live in a society where the economic or the political level of measurement has more value than the aesthetic level of measurement. And unfortunately, that then reflects itself in how we operate in society. And that's where you see the issues that we see today, this, you know, with the riots. That's where we see income inequality. That's where we see gender inequality, homophobia. And so that sort of philosophical thought really like blew my mind away, because here I had been spending my whole life just trying to make sure I was professionally set so my family didn't suffer. And I had realized that I spent my whole life trying to attain something and didn't really focus on my personal self and didn't really value the aesthetic. And that 10 years ago started a journey that would then get me into really painting art. And so if you see my art in the picture right there, it's really about the balance between sort of masculine and feminine energy, right? And so what I believe is really at the core of a lot of our issues is this inequality of our level of measurement. And so when you're looking at my art, they look like men. They look like strong men. Man, they might hurt you. That's a cowboy, you know? It's like I grew up in Texas with cowboys. But there's the other side of that, which is the big bright pink earring, the vibrant colors, the lips that look that have like they have lipstick. And it's this idea that I think for our society to get to a place where we need to be, we really got to start to address the balance and the inequities that we see and how we look at sort of masculine, feminine art, politics, aesthetic, economic lines. And so I, you know, that's really what my art is sort of really centered about. That's kind of at the core of it. Now, as far as how my art's helped me, it's my secret weapon. It's the number one thing that I think art does that people don't understand is it really creates empathy. And I think more and more, we really need more and more empathy in this world. You know, someone like me, I never empathize with anyone. I could care less about them. When I was growing up, because I just didn't want my mother and my family to suffer, and that's what was most important to me. But what I have found in art and in my journey is that it's really about having empathy and really about trying to help people realize this imbalance and really empower them to start their own journey of art. And so when I think about the space that my art holds, it's really about one of like, I'm just showing you the way that I'm doing life, but I know that I haven't lived a life that's been full of empathy. I haven't lived a life that's really cared about the aesthetic. And I'm the first one to stand up and say, look, hey, I've got to change. And so every day I paint, every day I doodle, because it makes me more human and it increases my empathy. And that's really been the driving engine that's allowed me to work at Connect. I raised nearly $4 million in 2.5 years to build the region's first diversity-focused startup accelerator, because I really am really focused on how do we really bridge the gap between communities that have long been neglected and really get them where they need to be. And so having that art and having that ability to tap into that empathy really is my secret weapon. And I would encourage anybody that hasn't really thought about themselves as an artist to know that, hey man, everyone's an artist. Trust me, everybody has their own medium and their own venue. And so I really would encourage you to start to pursue that, because I think it's going to make for you a much more balanced person. And so, you know, as far as the kind of last piece, and then Kip, I don't know if there's questions, but the last piece that I'll say is, I really think that, you know, for me, I think there's so many different ways that we can address the arts, right? I think funding for, you know, public exhibits, funding to increase the you know, give people our collection, San Diego's collection, increase that. I think there's so many routes that people should go and help. The route that I'm really interested in, and the thread that I've always been interested in, has been on inclusive economic growth and really providing artists the tools and the resources that they need so that they can take control of their own life and be successful. And so when I'm looking at programs that are being created, Todd, I'm looking at you now, buddy. When I'm looking at programs that are being created, I'm very interested to see how are your programs really creating sustainability for artists in the long term, and how are your programmings providing the resources and support that they need so that they can be financially independent. Because until we get to that, everything else is going to be just band-aids, right? And so, you know, 500,000 for 18 artists, there's a lot more artists than 18. And so we're really going to have to think creatively about how are we going to provide the resources and support for artists so that they can be self-sustaining. And I think that's where you start to look at accelerator programs. You start to look at rent. You start to look at pricing for space. You start to look at mentorship. How can we work with the city colleges, the community colleges, the universities? How can we as city leaders be that convener to start to bring people to the table that haven't been brought to the table before, so that we can get outcomes that we haven't seen before? And so I kind of leave it at that, because I think that if artists aren't able to self-sustain, then they're always going to be in this position of not being able to be involved. They're always going to be in this position of having to lean on someone else to get some help. And so long as you do that, you're going to give someone a fish every day. They're going to have to come back to get that fish. You teach them how to fish. Well, now we have a real society that's adding value, that's inclusive, and we're starting to see that economic growth that we have. And I guess the last thing I'll say, Kip, is something else that I'm very passionate about. And if you take a look at that talk that I gave, it was in front of 500 creatives. They were all designers, all entrepreneurs, and it was on my wedding day. And they asked me, like, why would you give a talk on your wedding day? And I say this: we need more artists as leaders. We need more diversity in our leadership. We need more diversity amongst our founders, executives, and boards of directors. Until we have diverse leadership that actually has the power, the ability to make decisions at the top, we will not see any change. And so for me, the part that's really interesting is, how do we activate artists to get involved? And there's a big reason why I ran for office, because how am I going to tell people to do this if I'm not myself going to do that? And so I really want to encourage that if you are an artist or you know artists, get them to the Dem Club, get them politically active, because I think not only are they going to add value because they're going to have creative, awesome ideas that are different than what we see in our circles, but I really think that until we have artists making the decisions, until we have people that are making decisions that understand how to paint and how to make music and how to act, we won't have a society that's reflective of the community that we have it in. So anyways, art creates empathy. I get pumped up about art, and I'm happy to talk with anybody that wants to afterwards about my art, and I'm curious about what your art is, and I'd love to hear about it. So, and thank you, Kip, for the opportunity. I hope that's what you wanted.
Thank you so much, H. And just before we get to Todd, Gloria, I just want to give Jacqueline maybe a quick minute to answer this question from Doug Case about the best way to advocate for public funding. It sounds like you're engaging in projects like the regional artist market that is going to help with funding, but how do those special projects create this loop where people become aware of the need for funding, and hopefully that somehow bubbles to the top with more money coming to organizations? Have you guys thought about this as you're launching new programs?
Okay, sorry. Yeah, it's tough. I think especially in the caveat to Doug's question is also, like, at this time, especially when there's going to be major cuts to, like you said, the safety net, public safety programs. I think it's important to acknowledge that, yes, while arts are extremely important, there are certain things that need to be taken care of first, and artists will always be scrappy and find a way to advocate for themselves and show up. But I guess for what we do, I think in all of our programs, we just make sure that, like, the elected officials and the city, the commission, that they are very much in the loop of what we're doing, and by proxy, they're able to learn about, the amazing arts programs that are happening and what artists are doing. So there's that. And that's kind of how we've gone about it, for things to bubble up to the top. It's not a huge city, so there is sort of some knowledge already from them of what's happening. I don't know if that exactly answers that question. I'm not sure if we've completely figured it out.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, especially with this weekend, that we do need to be cognizant of other communities too. But it sounds like your organization, with some of the shows you're putting on, is really trying to bring in those communities.
Yeah.
So Thank you. I do want to now, we're so fortunate to have Todd Gloria with us. He's the assembly member for California's 78th district, the top vote getter, and was endorsed by the Democratic Party in the primary race for mayor. We're all very familiar with Todd's accomplishments, and he's been noted for his presence in the arts and culture scene here. I've been glad to get to know more about his team and about him over the course of his campaign. Thank you so much for being with us, Todd.
Let's unmute. There we go. Kip, thank you. Thank you for having me. Thanks for unmuting me. And thank you for the discussion. And it's great to see you. Jacqueline, if you all don't know SDAI, you should go check it out. I don't want to call it a hidden jewel in Balboa Park because it's right there on the Prado. It may not have the number of employees and the budget of some of the other organizations, but the art they put out is so incredible. And some of those visuals, I've been to some of those events, and it's really kind of cool stuff. And anyone who thinks that Balboa Park is a little maybe old school, there's some really cutting edge cool stuff going on at SDAI. And so Jacqueline, I appreciate what you're doing. And Zoya, thank you for your comments as well. I'm mindful that you have an interpreter, and I know I talk way too fast, so my apologies to the interpreter. We'll get through this together. If I could add a few things on the arts front, and then I'm certainly happy to chat about anything that's on your mind. I'd like to talk a little bit about COVID, if I may, because given the pandemic, I think this is exactly the time that you need to hear directly from elected leaders about what we're doing and what we're trying to do, acknowledging that there's another crisis going on right now relative to racial injustice, police violence, and other really heavy issues. And while arts may feel afield from these really difficult issues, I recognize that in a time when we feel so divided, it is often the arts that bring us together. And this is why we have to prioritize them, not think of them as extracurricular or dessert, but they are the main course. They are critical to civic life, and we have to act accordingly. To that end, and I love my friend Doug Case's question, because I had a front row seat to advocacy for the arts and culture community for the 8 years I was on the city council. And I will tell you that maybe two things. One is the arts are always on the cutting board, right? It just always is the case. And you see that in this year's budget proposal where the Arts and Culture Commission is recommended to be cut in half in terms of its funding. And I actually remember during the Great Recession when, I'm going to say his name once, but not more than once, because if you say it 3 times, he'll appear. But Carl DeMaio got the great idea of waiving the city's public art ordinance, which requires for a public project of some kind to have a small component of public art in it. This is a way that some neighborhoods can get access to the arts and help beautify and revitalize themselves. He asked for and was successful in getting the city council to waive that ordinance during the Great Recession. Now, well, I point this out, one, because I voted against it. I was one of the few that did. But secondly, it actually saved the city no money. Right, the money that was there, it just kind of sat aside on the sidelines for a little while, and just was illustrative of how the arts can be exploited. Again, it's seen as not necessary or not a priority, and in difficult times it becomes even worse. Right, so that's the bad part of it. The good part of it is that any of you who've been to a budget hearing, I think it predates my time on the city council, so this would be for over 12 years now. The arts community shows up during budget season. They just show up, and they get results as a result. Now, are things where we would like them to be? No, surely not. We could always do better. And I think what H was talking about is particularly on point, where areas we could do better. But you can imagine what it is to have a sea of artists, art executives, nonprofit leaders, community leaders come to the council and plead for arts funding. And so while it is often proposed for some pretty significant cuts, those cuts don't always happen, or at least they're not always as bad as first proposed because of the advocacy. And I think actually, and I told this to other stakeholder groups when I was chair of the budget committee, you can learn a thing or two from the arts community because they know how to mobilize and activate. If we had a similar group for infrastructure, let me just tell you, our roads would look a lot better because the arts community knows how to activate, get organized, and get results. Same can be true for our rec centers, right? We don't have similar advocacy groups for these other components of our budget, and it's borne out in the results of how the budgeting is done. I'll tell you, this is also a predicament at the state level. We are looking at a $54 billion budget deficit for the fiscal year that starts on July 1st. And while the arts funding in California has been going up rather substantially year over year, we fund things through the California Arts Council, and that money does flow down to San Diego, often to bigger organizations, and that's a real challenge. But nevertheless, that money from Sacramento for the arts does make its way down to San Diego, but that is slated for some fairly significant reductions. That's going to be a real challenge, given that we are really basically counting on the federal government to provide us additional relief funding so that we don't have to cut education, healthcare, and things like the arts. So there's a lot of need. This conversation is very timely because whether it's the city's budget selection process, the state's budget process, this is an active question for legislators, for decision makers, for executives at the municipal and state level. And so as you all leave this meeting this afternoon, prepared to be better advocates for the arts, I think you could have the potential of making a significant difference at the local and state level. I was asked to mention a little bit about Balboa Park as well relative to the arts, and naturally that is the cultural heart of San Diego. I would say take out culture, just the heart of San Diego. Everyone loves Balboa Park. But I think that is illustrative also of the challenge when it comes to arts and funding, in the sense that this is something that everyone loves, right? Everyone loves Balboa Park, and yet it's not where we would like it to be, right? In terms of the built environment, in terms of the amenities, in terms of the visitor experience, and in terms of the ability of artists to actually access that, right? You have a captive audience of millions of people. This is why SDAI is so important. You have a captive audience of millions of visitors annually. And whether it's the inability to find parking or the frequency of transit or quality transit or safe bike lanes to get you there, or to once you get there, whether or not the materials are in your language, or whether or not you can afford to access some of these places. These are all collective challenges that really create barriers to arts, which I think are self-fulfilling, right? Because those barriers are a part of the notion that this is elective, that it's not essential for human existence to have access to good quality arts and culture. And so we can do better. I think that we hope that we can do better. And let me just tell you a quick way how I think we could potentially do better. We recently had a conversation about increasing the tourist tax in San Diego. This was primarily for the purpose of expanding our convention center, but portions of those dollars were dedicated to other things that were seen as potentially enhancing the visitor experience to San Diego, specifically repairing more roads and addressing our homelessness crisis. That ballot measure was close, but failed by a small margin, which is to say nothing advanced. I think that as we look forward to what we need to do to make smart strategic investments going forward, I think that when we look at whether or not we have a competitive tourist tax, and our tourist tax is relatively is lower than our competitors in the market space. When you look at Anaheim, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Las Vegas, they all have substantially higher tourist taxes. We could look at a situation where we still need to expand our convention center. I think that's important. That does bring a lot of visitors here. They pay the tax, and that tax goes to City Hall, and it pays for firefighters, police officers, road repair, arts and culture. If you were to expand it again and thought about it from a visitor serving experience, what if we thought about it from a different experience? Not the roads that visitors drive upon, but the attractions that they see, the things that draw them here. It is more than the convention center. It is Balboa Park. It is Mission Bay. It is our arts culture, the La Jolla Playhouse, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe that could be the permanent funding source that has been kind of, forgive the phrase, the holy grail for the arts community, because so often the budget is at the whim of the economy, right? Budget is up, they may get some more money. When the budget is down, they certainly will get less. This was what the intention of the tourism tax was when it was initially conceived, and yet those dollars now flow to the general fund, and a small trickle of it may end up at the arts for arts. But creating a dedicated funding source to do things like make real investments in Balboa Park, to make real investments in arts and culture organizations that actually bring people to San Diego, I think that might be a smart way that not only could get more electoral support for a measure that was put before the public. One of the main challenges of asking people to tax for the convention center is that many San Diegans don't go to the convention center, right? That is not, we're not ones to go to medical device conventions. We may go to the auto show, we may go to Comic-Con if you can get a ticket, but otherwise it may not be a part of your day-to-day experience. But Lord knows, going to some of our arts and culture organizations are a more common experience. And if we could make a commitment that by doing this, we could get more arts into more neighborhoods. I'm thinking of particularly neighborhoods that are underserved when it comes to the arts. These could be ideas that would not just be good for the politics of getting the measure passed, but would be good for San Diegans and particularly underserved neighborhoods that need this kind of programming to improve their quality of life, to make their neighborhoods better places to live. That's my art thing. If I can just quickly on COVID, just to the extent that this is a hard shift, I acknowledge that. But you know, as your assembly member, thank you so much for the honor of being your voice in Sacramento. I'm basically asked three kind of common questions. Number one is, when is this all going to be over? And anyone who tells you that they have that date is lying to you. You know, we don't know, but we in California have committed ourselves to following public health data and science and professionals to guide us, not arbitrary standards like what you've seen in some other states. And I hope that you all are proud to be Californians and knowing that we were the first state to move to stay at home, that we have been leading with science. And as a result, we can demonstrably show that we flattened the curve and saved thousands and thousands of lives. Well, we need to let that success story continue. And so when people often say, well, can I go to this event next week? Or do you think I might be able to go to that concert in a few months? I can't make that representation. I would never lie to my constituents. I can just tell you that we're going to continue to slowly reopen as data and science suggests that we can. Some of you may have got your hair cut for the first time in 3 months in the last couple of days, and I was one of those, and it's a good thing, but we still have a long ways to go, particularly from an arts and culture perspective, right? Because so many of those organizations are still shuttered because they can't open. I do believe they'll be able to reopen in a measurement of weeks, not months, but it's going to be slow going. And so that's the number one question. When are we going to get out of this? If we had a vaccine tomorrow, I would tell you tomorrow, but we of course don't have that. So instead we have to stand up robust testing, robust tracing, robust treatment. And we're doing that, we're getting there. California should exceed 50,000 tests a day in the next week, which would be which is getting close to where we need to be to sort of say that we've got our testing apparatus under control. So that's good, but we're not there yet. We're getting close. So that's what we're doing. Number two is, when am I getting my unemployment? And I heard Jacqueline mention that for artists, particularly many of them being independent contractors, self-employed, you know, they are eligible for a special kind of unemployment that was created by the federal government called Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, or PUA. Many of us are familiar with UI, unemployment insurance, but PUA is the other one. 5 million Californians have applied for unemployment assistance in the last number of weeks. And the number really is kind of sustaining itself. We're kind of looking for a cliff where it goes down again, but we're not kind of there yet. Mind you, before the pandemic, we were getting about 2,000 applications a day. Now we're well north of about 150,000 a day. Some days it's gotten close to over 400,000. So you just see the volume of what's coming in. I share all this with you to say that I recognize a lot of people are still waiting. Most people have been accommodated, but not everybody, and not nearly enough to make me satisfied. If my office can be of assistance to any of you who may be in this position, or maybe it's a spouse or a housemate or family member, have them be in touch with my office, with Senator Atkins' office. This may have been mentioned earlier by her representative, but we are here to serve. We're assisting about 2,000 78th district residents right now with applications for unemployment, which I guarantee is a 20-fold increase of what we normally would do. So we are here to help. That's question number two. And then number three, what does the new normal look like? And, you know, I think we're all figuring it out. I don't know if many of you have been to a restaurant. You can kind of get a sense of, you know, virtual menus, servers with masks on. But I really invite you all to share with me what you're seeing, what you're observing, and maybe where you could use some help. It was a number of restaurateurs that contacted me early on after the stay-at-home order, like day one or day two, asking if they could potentially do takeaway cocktails, right? Drive home, take home with you. Something I didn't think was going to be possible, but we asked and advocated with state regulators, and they granted that ability. While that has not made up for all the lost business, that has helped a number of restaurants be able to stay open during this crisis. And that was an idea that came from the community. We're working on similar ideas about slow streets and reopening them, allowing more businesses to occupy more space so that they can get more customers while remaining socially distant. That is something that you see is moving forward. We are working now with electronic signatures. A lot of the states' licensing requirements require wet signatures or in-person signatures. Moving to electronic signatures makes a lot of sense, working on that as well. So I invite your suggestions on places where we can make your life better, where we can maybe get things back to normal quicker. This is an area of advocacy that we can work on right now. And what I've been heartened by is that there is a lot more openness by state regulators to do some of this. Not 100%, but a good chunk of the time they've been willing to say yes. Again, takeaway cocktails, nothing I thought would be possible 2-3 months ago, but now it's something I don't ever see us getting rid of, because I think, frankly, people will lose their minds if you don't allow them to have this going forward. If I may, I'll just stop there and maybe take questions if that's appropriate, and turn it back to Kip. But I'm happy to answer any questions, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to Point Loma OB Dems, and grateful for all that you guys are doing for our party in advance of the November elections, which, not that we needed convincing, but I think if anything, the last number of months have shown us we need to make some changes, certainly at the top of the ballot, and definitely on the bottom of the ballot as well. And I know that our Dem clubs are going to be critical to mobilizing grassroots voters to make those changes that are going to make our world a better place.
Thank you so much, Todd. Just to kind of maybe bridge the gap between, the park, when you were talking about Balboa Park, and the COVID crisis, what's the status of, opening up streets to dining establishments? And what do you think's the potential of, more slow streets, more streets being open to neighborhood residents? Because I think even while people are suffering, they are kind of enjoying getting to know their communities more without so many cars.
Yeah, so in terms of the outdoor dining, the state ABC, which regulates restaurants and bars where they may serve food and serve alcohol, has granted the use of the adjacent property. So whether that's the sidewalk, a parking lot. I live in Mission Hills. Harley Gray, which is on the corner of Washington Street and Goldfinch, has taken over the parking lot next door and put tables and chairs out there and are serving more people. So that is working. Some of the grander ideas that are out there, the Little Italy Association and I have been working together, the Gaslamp Quarter Association and I have been working together to try and do something on India Street and on Fifth Avenue, respectively. Right now, from a state perspective, they're good to go. The work is being done at the county and the public health office and the city with streets division to get those approvals. But I think that in the not too distant future, you will see that. And sort of transitioning to the second part of that, it's kind of a slow street, right? Where you're reclaiming more of the street back from cars and giving it back to people. So this will be a continuation of that. I think that what's happening at the city, I'm hearing generally positive things. Naturally, human beings by nature don't like change. And so there are some folks who are not happy with the slow streets. But I think that they're relatively successful. I know anyone who's ever served on a city council knows that one of the primary complaints is the cars go so darn fast down my street. I don't know when it took a pandemic, but I don't think anyone's opposed to cars traveling slower down the street, or maybe going onto major arterials rather than on neighborhood streets. And that's a good thing. So I've been heartened by the city council. You see Georgette Gomez and Chris Ward and others really advocating, Dr. Jen advocating for this. It's getting expanded. And I think the question is, can we program it, like in the case of Fifth Avenue or India Street, with stuff that could help us address other issues? The slow streets are meant to address the need to get exercise and the larger number of people who are pedestrians who need safety. But we also have businesses that are hurting. And I think this could be a win-win where, again, you allow these businesses to operate in conformance with the social distancing requirements of the public health department, but without having to sacrifice the volume that they need to make the rent, to pay payroll, to get people back to work.
Thanks, Todd. This is Mary.
There you are.
And I'm taking over for Kip. We were just chatting to each other. If anybody else has a question, we can take one more. We do still have some club business in terms of voting on our budget. So anybody who would like to jump in with a question, you're welcome to right now, if you'd like to.
We do have one question from Anita, who's bringing up the tours with Todd.
That's right. Sure. Anita, do you want to unmute yourself so you can ask it yourself? I'll go ahead and ask it. The tours with Todd to the parks and museums, this provided an opportunity to be aware of San Diego's rich diversity and brought together constituents from different ethnic, social, and age groups. So as mayor, what would you do to foster such multicultural awareness?
Well, Anita, you're so kind. I think for those of you that don't know what this is, I'm kind of an informal guy, right? And I've never really done a traditional town hall meeting, but a number of years ago, we converted to tours with Todd, which was sort of taking the opportunity to spotlight or use the our office, we can sometimes get access to places the general public can't necessarily get to, and using that to benefit constituents. I mean, I can go on these tours, but if I can take 20, 30, 40, 50 of my constituents to check this stuff out too, that's a good thing. And what I discovered is that people were much more interested in taking a tour of, say, the Gaslamp Quarter or behind the scenes in Balboa Park than they were in talking to me. Now, I was there the whole time. I never experienced any of the tour because I would just answer questions. People knew that they could just sort of pull me aside, and we'd have great chats that were, I think, still meaningful, but it allowed San Diegans access to their own city in a way that they often don't get to see. I mean, I think a lot of us, after a certain while, take for granted that we live here and we don't take full advantage of all the amazing amenities that are with us. So we tried to do this. Anita, I'm glad it sounds like you found those enjoyable. And I'm interested in trying to continue to do that, not just for bringing people together, as you say, but to really give people access to their city. I think that now more than ever, we have to operate in a transparent fashion and be directly involved and help people see what is going on. I think a lot of people, much of the public process, the questions about why do certain budget decisions get to be made relative to the arts community? Well, that's a mystery to too many people. People like me should be in the business of demystifying that. And so if we're taking a tour of the convention center, all right, which we did, it was really cool to see people say, oh, okay, it's more than the auto show. Oh, wow, you have this whole culinary operation. Oh, by the way, you employ all these people, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not just about bringing people together, but it's about really giving them ownership and transparency in how their city operates. And I'd hope to be a mayor that continues to do that. I think in the 21st century, more than ever, that is super important in order to have the trust and the credibility to govern a city of this size.
Thanks. And then Anita, I know you and Will, also from the Arts Council, both of you guys are very involved with that too. So Widad, you can go ahead and unmute yourself to ask your question if you'd like to, or if not, I'm happy to ask it for you. This is just the last one. So
Okay. Yes.
Go ahead. Yeah, perfect, thanks.
Yeah, the question for Todd, Gloria, thank you for everything you said and very nice to see you. My name is Widad Shlota. I'm an American Iraqi who lives here. My brother-in-law, Adib Makki, is an Iraqi-American accomplished artist. And as you all know, San Diego has the most number of immigrants and of all United States, and it has a big Iraqi American thriving accomplished community, and among them are artists, sculptors that had left Iraq for all kinds of unfortunate reasons, and like many academians and engineers and doctors, when they came here, it is difficult to integrate. And one of them are the artists, and they are the most hit, actually. So my brother-in-law is an essential worker, working to support his life at Ralph in the downtown. And in Iraq, he was an extremely famous artist. John Laughlin and Susan Peniado came to our house many times, and they have seen the pieces of art of Adib. So I say that because I do feel that the public in San Diego and in the United States are missing by not giving opportunities to see art from other countries that are diverse and ethnic, but yet very modern, progressive, and can speak to everybody. So what can you do, Todd, Gloria, I hope, when you are a mayor? What can you do to make that more visible?
Well, I mean, there's kind of the arts in general, as I was addressing, in terms of, a dedicated funding source for the arts, so that, whether it's Iraqi American artists or any other group could have access to those resources to do the work. But a couple of things that come to mind would be that many of you have probably been to City Hall. The ground floor is often used to spotlight different causes, organizations, parts of our community. We should talk some more. If I'm honored enough to be the next mayor of San Diego, I would love to take that space and turn it over for a period of time. This is done for a week or a couple of weeks or even a month or more to spotlight, stuff that's there. Because tons of people go through the doors of City Hall, people from all walks of life, and making sure they understand the diversity and the talent of our community is kind of what that space is for. So that's one kind of quick and no cost way to sort of think about it. But I would hope that everyone would understand that when I'm articulating on behalf of broader arts support, that's not exclusive to any part of that community. It's not just for visual artists and not performing artists. It's not just for public art. It is meant to be fully inclusive. And I think a challenge that we'll need, and maybe again, you can help me with that, Sweetheart, is that we have to have an Arts and Culture Commission that is representative of the broader community, that we take a very broad net, cast out a broad net to make sure that that diversity of this city is reflected in that decision making, and that we utilize the resources that we have. One of the best things I think that happened in Balboa Park, in the Plaza de Panama a number of years ago, when the Art Museum took a number of its statues that were and placed them out in the plaza, right? It enhanced the plaza. It gave San Diegans more access to art than they would have had otherwise. And all of us were concerned about them being vandalized. This never happened. So I share that with you as something, as an example of what we've done in the past that we could replicate going on in the future. And this could be a dialogue you and I have going forward. It's still a long way to Election Day, but I'm hoping to have 8 years of opportunities to make sure that the diversity of the city is on full display and that everyone sees and feels themselves in the city government that represents them and serves them.
Thank you, Todd. And I just want to read what I wrote earlier. I said that artists can strengthen the will and push people to act. They don't think like policymakers. Artists think from the heart, big revolutionary and visionary ideas, and art empowers the heart of people. So if we think like that, I think we can make a significant place for artists to do more, to offer more.
I think one thing that unites a lot of what our speakers have said today is that, artists need money to live and to stay here. And, being able to afford an apartment, having a commission for arts and culture that helps to build a market here so that artists can actually make money off their work is, I think, a really important component of all this as well. And I think we have another question, Marin.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So we did have one last question from Sean Michael. If you would like to ask it, you are welcome to. I am also happy to ask it for you if you'd rather chat it to me, as some of the other questioners did. Okay, it may have been a mistaken raised hand. You need to click your unmute. I can unmute you. Hang on a second. John, can you unmute him? We're going to work on getting the slides up.
Yeah, I don't see that Sean has his audio. Sean Michael.
Oh, I got it. He just chatted it to me, so I'll ask it. Okay. He says, I was curious about how people can best get involved with art projects in the community if we have obstacles to accessing opportunities. What do you, Todd, think is the best way to get involved? Teaming up with other artists, like in Fonai X design murals that other artists then painted. I couldn't go do that in person. I'd like to be more involved here, but I'm housebound even before coronavirus. I was starting to find accessible ways to participate more, and then the pandemic arrived. Open to input.
Some of the other panelists probably are better suited to answer that question. I'm hopeful that technology like what I'm talking to you through right now is going to help create better connections that don't require leaving the home. But, I don't know, from H or Jacqueline, do you guys have suggestions you can maybe share with Sean Michael?
And also just anybody, H, Jacqueline, or either of you that would like to chime in, I think that this is really relevant, and I would love to put it on our outgoing mailer and on our website too, because it just is something maybe I think other people might like to hear also. And if you need to think about the answer, you can just email it to me too.
I think you need to unmute them to.
Yes, they should be.
Okay.
Hello?
Hi.
Okay.
Oh, okay. So this is Jacqueline. One thing I can speak for San Diego Art Institute in particular. For us, like I said, we really are pivoting towards creating more virtual programs for people to access the arts. For us, we created like a virtual tour of our show, so you're able to go through and read and see photos and videos from our exhibition that we have up. And we're currently working to do a video series as well that will be a consistent, sort of part of our programming where, you don't have to be at the space physically to experience the art. And for us, at least, accessibility is a really important part of what we do. If you do come to the space, and actually it's available online too, we were able to work with UC San Diego, one of the scientists there at the Mayberry Institute, I believe it's called. Her name is Denise Ilkvasaaren, and she actually worked with people at UCSD to create ASL translations of all of the text that's part of our show. So if you're interested in getting, a little bit more of a, your art fix, and you want to see what we're doing, we do have ASL capabilities, as well as when you're going to the show, and for our video stuff, that it's all has English and Spanish subtitles. So I can speak for us at least.
Yeah, so I would just add a couple things. So one is like where, kind of in tech, we're always taught that when people see challenge, we see an opportunity. And so I'd encourage you to see the opportunity in the moment, because I think especially for artists, it's really interesting in that, generally speaking, very powerful people in art, and I know Kip can kind of talk a little bit more about this, but they have dominance over sort of what art is cool and what's trendy. I think with COVID, it sort of has an opportunity to democratize that. So meaning you can actually be on the same platform that the Saatchi Gallery is, that the Louvre is. Everyone's struggling to figure out what is it going to look like next. What are art shows looking like? What are new performances looking like? So I think thinking creatively and feeling empowered that you have the same tools available that big art galleries have now, and so you can be active on and not devaluing your footprint. So sharing artists that you care about, like in different forums, like just being using your network to say, hey man, here's this new artist, Bill or Jenny, and I like them, check out their work. I know a lot of artists, that's super valuable to them. Facebook groups and networking that's online. So really getting active online, I think is a really great way, regardless of what your limitations are, to really start to get, to really help artists and really push the arts further.
Thanks, exactly. And I would love to put together a list of resources in our outgoing email also, just for things here locally. So thank you so much to all of our guests, H and Jacqueline, Zoya, Todd. Thank you so much, Anil and Hannah, our sign language interpreters. And thank you so much, Sean Michael, for providing that as an idea that we will definitely carry forward in the future. So shifting gears really quickly, we are now going to do our budget vote, which is